Hey everybody, this is Joseph Hasek, and welcome to the Fired Up Network. Welcome to Maple Leafs Forever Leaf Talk with the broadcasting legends Storm and Norm Rumack and my good, close personal friend Mark Swilinski, who always should have been the writer for the Fired Up Network, not some other league, but whatever. All right. Don't you agree? At least I would have paid better, right, Norm? Norm could attest how much I pay. Look,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I started paying him Norm a little bit more. He got a new vintage Maple Leaf shirt. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. Well, it wasn't with your money, that's for sure, Joe.
Oh, what is? What is? You get with my money? You bought some Hubba Bubba. All right. The big news out of Maple Leaf Land, and it was curious. They did it about 9 o'clock on Monday. They fired GM Brad Treliving. Now, Mark, I'll start off with you. I guess we weren't surprised that this is going to happen, but what surprised was on a Monday night, 9 p.m., about an hour before Maple Leafs going to play Anaheim and going to crush Radko Gudas. And yeah, we crushed him. Max Domi gave a few cheap shots at the end, but I'm not going to say that, all right? I'm not going to say that. But were you surprised at the timing?
Joe, no. I know that the timing seems, unorthodox or whatever you want to call it, because, like you said, it comes an hour before puck drop on a very important game. But one, if the players are not dialed into that game and are distracted by a management move, then their head's in the wrong spot. They were dialed in. I don't think that news would have even affected a preseason game. Some players probably say it might have, and I can't see it. If you're at the game, you're dialed in. And two, that's business, and this business, like we were talking about, privately last night and in at other times, it was overdue. So the timing to me is almost late. This is an embarrassing season. It is a waste of a season, and you're wasting, generational talents in Matthews, Nylander, and to a lesser degree, Tavares and Riley. But you have, your core pieces gone through a year where nothing was done. And in fact, you took a step backwards with them.
Yeah.
So that falls squarely on the person who assembled the roster, and he paid the price. So the timing of it, like I said, I'm surprised it didn't come sooner. And I'm not surprised that it came then. They decided to do that. Whatever time they wanted to release it is up to them. That's business. That's pro sports. There's no forgiveness, and nobody's going to get any sympathy. So for me, on my part, let's get on with it. I'm going to care about the details here, but I don't. You want to see a road to improvement. That's the most important thing. The timing, to me, doesn't matter.
Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, the timing, it's an interesting topic, but as Mark said, it's not exactly, crucial or critical to the future of the Maple Leafs. So I guess they have some candidates in mind. We all have candidates in mind who would be good to take over. And so it was surprising a little bit, but not earth-shattering. And as Mark said, for the players, the only thing they were focused on was that Anaheim game and Mr. Gudas. And, so they managed to do that okay. But yeah, this has been, from a Maple Leaf perspective, a disastrous season. It really has been. And last year's playoff was a horror show, as we all know. So they never really replaced the points they lost with Mitch Marner. And that's on Treliving's watch. So that was his responsibility to, that's comes with the territory. If a player leaves on your watch, it's your responsibility to find the players you need to replace those points, and playmaking for Austin Matthews on the same line. So he didn't do that. And, that's one of the things that cost him his job. And as for who's next, probably won't be a number one selection for most people, but I'd love to see Chris Pronger get an opportunity. I think he knows what he's doing. He was one of the most feared defensemen of the past generation. He knows what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. He knows what it takes to win a playoff series, obviously, by that, take one with the other. And he knows what kind of players it takes to compose a Stanley Cup team. So I don't know if the Maple Leafs have him in mind, but But I'll tell you what, he'd sure be. I think he'd be an absolutely perfect fit for that franchise.
Wait a minute. There was not even a question for Mark. Mark, did you find a question in there or what?
I agree with Pronger. If you want to get this out of the way about in terms of who's next, I can give you a pretty good rundown. I've done a little bit of work on it myself, blah, blah, blah. But Pronger, if not GM, and I think he would be a good GM. I think he's been in the game both on from the media side and working with the league and things like that. Norm's point about knowing what it takes is really well-founded, because if you remember when he won the cup, it was with Anaheim, I believe, but the conference final series against Detroit, and we've had this conversation before, he took out Thomas Holmstrom, right? Thomas Holmstrom was running havoc on that series. You could not move him from in front of the net. He was one of the that generation's best in front of the net players. He scored so many goals, and he was dominating the Ducks. Pronger took him into the boards, gave him a concussion. He got a game suspension. Holmstrom's out for the rest of the season. Ducks go on to win in Game 7 and then go on to win the Cup against the Senators. He knows what he's doing, and what we've also thought was a vital conversation, a kind of person who will do what no one else will do to win. There you go. I give him a high marks, and if not as GM, then definitely as some kind of president or overseer or assistant or whatever. There are many other names floating around. You got Jason Spezza, you got Mark Hunter, Doug Armstrong, and Brandon Pridham, who's being in-house hall. There's also several other young players, young candidates, pardon me. And the Leafs have had a history of hiring young GMs. Dubas was 32. Gord Stellick was 30 when he was hired. So there's not an unprecedented thing here. And I can just rip off a few names. Eric Tulsky in Carolina, an absolute master of analytics, and a big reason there, Carolina is the organization they are. You've got Ryan Martin in the Rangers, Matthew Darsh with Tampa, Chris McFarland with Colorado, and Derek Clancy with the Canucks, and Rob DeMaio with St. Louis. All of them are really good roster specialists, really good at analytics, and if I'm not mistaken, that's the way things are going to go, or at least teams have shown that trend to get a GM who doesn't have to so much rely on a cap specialist, but also knows that end of the game as well. So the question, when you ring off all these names, experienced guys like Armstrong, and while Spezza's young, he does have experience because he's been with Dubas ever since they left the Leafs several years ago. Or if you hire somebody young, say like DeMaio or somebody like Tulsky, right? Names completely out of, or at least would be out of the blue to the general fans. Or do you go with a veteran person, right? So that becomes the question. What kind of mix do you want here? A lot of people are leaning towards this idea that the Leafs need a veteran hand in here because it's a mess and only a veteran would know how to clean it up. I think personally you go with Pronger and an army of young players from the groups we've seen here. If you're going to move forward, go with somebody who's young enough to know what forward means. And that doesn't mean that a veteran doesn't, but, get somebody intact, plugged in with energy and all those, adjectives that we have. That to me is the way to go. Get somebody young in there, or you can go like with what Ottawa does, surround your coaching staff and your GM with veterans like Daniel Alfredson, Poulin, and Jacques Martin as in advisory roles, who are there as a steady guiding hand. But you got a good young person who you can probably, hope that he's going to, in the next 10 years, really make this thing what it should have been the last 10 years, is a consistent winner in the playoffs. So you've got those kind of questions you want to ask, young or old. How do you want to go? What do you see in these candidates? And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the solution is here in terms of those questions.
All right. So both you guys are right, and both of you guys have nailed it. I believe they're going to replace finally Brendan Shanahan as the chief of MLSE hockey with Pronger. And I believe Pronger is going to hire a GM, and that guy will probably be Armstrong from St. Louis. Now, here's the interesting thing. Two things. If it's Armstrong from St. Louis, does he keep? Because St. Louis, Berube, and all that. And if the GM or president does this, okay, they have the final say, but really does Austin Matthews or Matthew Knives or somebody young within the Maple Leaf organization have the final say? What do you say, Mark?
Good question. And your captain is always consulted on these moves. And if we're talking, are we talking about the change in the coaching staff or in the GM? Yes.
Yeah, GM and president and all that.
Yes, absolutely. That is going to be run by the dressing room. Your conduit to the dressing room is your captain. And you would probably have some of the other leadership in there. But this brings up an extremely interesting dynamic in that, what's your leadership with the Leafs player-wise now?
That's what I'm asking. Who's the leader there?
Well,
and is it really? And in hindsight, they took off the C from Tavares, but isn't he the real captain?
Well, that's a great question. They took the C off Tavares because he was a good captain who couldn't take the team over the bridge in the playoffs. That was the only thing. His captaincy, his quality as a captain wasn't questioned. He's been a captain his whole career since 2009. He is captain material. However, they originally wanted to give it to Austin, but Austin had that little off-ice mishap, and it really threw his career in terms of a captaincy off target. Now, given that and who you want as a leader, one thing I've noticed in Austin's absence is William Nylander stepping up a lot and talking on the bench, talking on the ice, and getting pissed off at other players because they're not doing their job. I think William, I don't know if he'd make a good captain. I really don't, but he's opened my eyes in terms of who is your leader or who is your leadership group. Do you go with 3 assistants next year? What does that do to Matthews, who everybody thinks is going to be out of here sooner or later because of this season, because of a massive step back, and he's going to be in his 10th season next year, 11th or 9th. He's in his 9th. His best before date is approaching very rapidly. So, that's what the pain of this year is. You've wasted a year of, having generational players in place, and you're not going to get them through the draft anymore because your draft is, you've given away picks, right? And we can talk about that some other time, but your leadership group might be, if Austin, I'm sure Austin's going to be around, and I don't see him as being a bad choice as captain. I just think he's got to get a little bit more vocal and be more demonstrative and be tougher. The way you look at Eric Lindros rising to his captaincy, the one thing he started doing is taking penalty minutes. People were picking on him, and as you know, he got many concussions. He got smoked many times, but he had to stand up for himself and put his stick in other people's face just to cut some room for himself. Now, I'd like to see a bit more out of Austin and lead in that way.
All right,
but none of them are. But is the answer 3 assistants? I don't know. That's just food for thought right now. But yeah, you have a leadership question on the ice as much as you have off the ice right now.
All right, I'll throw for this last question to Norman, then I'll ask you about the changes in Vegas with 8 games left. But go ahead, Norma. Final question about Mark Zielinski. And Norm, have you read his book, Norma?
Don't answer that, Norman.
It's a great name for a book, that's for sure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. All right, Joe.
Then why isn't it not selling if it's a great name? Listen, everybody on the Fired Up Network, this is President of Provinces of Canada speaking. If your name is Norma, if your name is Norma, Norman, Norma, Normie, Normandy, Norman, what? Buy the book. Buy the book. And hell, if your name's Mark, Joe, Paul, Steve, whatever, buy the book.
Thanks, Joe. You're my agent now. I've just hired you on the spot. What do you mean
agent now? I was your agent like 20 years ago. But anyways, go ahead, Normie.
Yeah. Well, what was your question aside from Norma, the book?
Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
You cheapskate. You don't even buy the book to support Mark Zielinski?
I barely have time to read my own mail, Joe.
Well, your mail, you know what it is? Collection. That I can tell you.
Yeah, from all the money
All
you
right, do
give.
you have any final questions for Mark or what? You still didn't even ask a question 20 minutes into the segment.
So I have a question for Mark. Well, yeah, I have a question for Mark.
Oh, thanks God, you remembered it.
Yeah, no. This year, the Stanley Cup playoffs is as wide open as it's going to be. But I like Tampa Bay. They've kind of resurrected themselves, and they got a great coach in Cooper, obviously. Their big time players are playing like they're big time players. They're getting the goalkeeping, they're getting the goal scoring, they're getting the defensive work. I think they're certainly a favorite to come out of the East. What do you think?
I agree 100%. They are tough. I will always have a soft spot for Buffalo. As you guys heard, it's probably my favorite road city.
You like
People
chicken
always look
wings.
at, yeah,
Norm, he likes chicken wings. That's why.
hell yeah, who doesn't? But yeah, Buffalo's real. They are for real. They had a little slide there within the last 2 weeks, but they've shown it. But yeah, Tampa not only has the experience, but they have, the building blocks from the past in terms of all the things we're talking about. And there is another young GM, Julian Brisebois, who built that team with experience that he gained and association with Steve Yzerman. But there you go with what can happen with a young former player stepping into a management role. So yeah, you're seeing the product of what we had hoped for with the Leafs. Sound management structure and a team that knows how to win and has great goaltending. Right now, if we look at Toronto, you look at the goaltending, right? And there is potential there. There is, you could say, with the two in the NHL and Hiddleby in the AHL, that you have a solid structure there and a solid future. But we'll see. They've been, when they're healthy and when they're with the team, because we know Woll stepped away from the team for personal reasons. There was a lot of setbacks there. But when that happens, you might get what you have in Tampa, right? Like it's just a solid number one guy, say Stellaris, coming up, stepping up, and doing the job and anchoring and covering up for your mistakes.
Okay.
Tampa's great. I'm really pulling for Ottawa too to make the playoffs and see what they've got, because I like their management structure and the way they skate and they work. All these are reflections of what we hope, as journalists, as writers, as members of the media, as podcasters. That's what we hope for the Leafs. But what we see outside, with like I always, heard me mention before, Montreal, Buffalo, Ottawa. I want to see those teams succeed. They all are, and they all are with the younger structures that we've been talking about here and in on other podcasts. So, yeah, you look at it, and I'll agree 100% with Norm that Tampa's got probably more than what those other teams have because they've been down that route. They've won, repeatedly, and they've been repeatedly to the biggest stage. So, yeah, if I'm a betting man and I got 10 grand to throw away, I'd probably put 8 of it on Tampa, a grand on Buffalo, and a grand on Montreal, and away we go. Let's see what happens. I think you might have a winner out of one of those.
Norm's pissed off. You don't even give him 50 cents. All right. So final question, and this doesn't come from me. We just got a question here, and I know this guy, and Mark knows this guy, and even Norm knows this guy. Some guy named Paul Hunter, formerly Telemarkets, formerly of the T-Star. All right. He wants to know if you had your druthers for Maple Leafs coach, considering that Berube may be let go, would you pick Peter DeBoer or Bruce Cassidy? If I'm in Toronto, Vegas, I take either one because both coaches Vegas. But that brings up a good point. For the Maple Leafs, with the stars they have and all that, is it Peter DeBoer or is it Cassidy? And both are Canadian there.
For me, oh man, I almost don't want to guess because I take either or, like openly and gladly, and I think he would be well ahead with either one of those. I am a Cassidy fan, largely because I've dealt with him more. I like what he did in Boston. He's coming out of a dicey situation in Vegas because they are not playing the way they should. Let's face it, unless you're Paul Maurice or John Cooper, coaches have a 2 to 3, maybe 4-year max shelf life where you're going to get listened to, right? We might be seeing a really rough situation with Torts back in the seat there with 8 games left. See if that rescues that situation. I'm not sure why Torts was put in there, other than he's a much stronger, more hardcore disciplinarian and demanding and accountability stressed coach, perhaps more than Cassidy was. I don't know. I just like what I feel in Cassidy for the Leafs roster. I think he would be very good, and I think he could get a game plan and get that team to play the way it should, and at the same time manage the leadership group and the players and stick to some basics there in terms of lines and keep things probably more consistent. I don't know on that end of it if that's a reason that things were disorganized with the Leafs, but get something positive going and be able to relate to that our current roster here in Toronto. So if you're asking me, I would, if I had to choose, I would choose Cassidy.
Well, Paul Hunter asked you. Now, regarding Torts, they brought him in to bring back Mitch Marner to Toronto. That's why, okay? Mitch Marner had a problem with...
If Mitch was here, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Babcock and all that. Okay. Norm, wake up. Because this is the time of a show here. Mark is going to promote his books. I suggest not only going out and buying it, when you go to Starbucks or Second Cup, because you go there like 600 times a day, all right? Take the book, read it, and then when I call you and say, we're going to do shows at 11, 12, whatever, be here on time with your Maple Leaf gear. Now, Norm, at the end, we're going to have the next show we're doing is Blue Jays. I want you to wear a Blue Jays shirt, all right? There you go. Mark, promote your books. Tell everybody what you want to do, and then we'll throw it to Norm.
You're too kind, as usual, and people have heard me talk about Norma. It's still out there. I've done very little work, and shame on me for that, for not promoting it better. But it's there, and you can get it anywhere, Amazon or, any of the, even, what do you call it, Costco and all those big box stores and that. You can get it through them, through their book departments. It's available anywhere online. You can look it up, and away you go. Got another book called Coop about minor league baseball, coming of age story. Still waiting on a decision from a publisher, but the longer you wait, you know how those work. The longer you wait, the stronger the answer is no. The publishing world's on its knees right now, so I am going to begin shopping it a bit more. I'm very excited about the book, and I just appreciate you guys listening to me talk about it, and I'll keep my fingers crossed, and hopefully good news for both books is coming up real soon.
All right, and Norm, tell everybody how they could get a hold of you. And we have a question from Bruce in Woodbridge. Would you trade Clark for Fedorov?
Well,
time's up, Norm. Go ahead and promote.
Yeah, I wouldn't, but I'm pretty sure Wendell Clark would make that trade.
I don't think you would ever trade Wendell, and I know you have to sooner or later, but that's a guy you start and finish his career in your jersey if you're lucky enough to ever have an opportunity to have a player like that. That's a no-brainer. And I know all good things come to an end, blah, 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 and it'll come to an end for Nylander, Matthews, Tavares, and Riley, the cornerstones of this market for the last 8 or 9 years. But Clark, no, you don't trade him.
There you go, Norm. But go ahead, tell everybody how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, right here on the Fired Up Network, a couple times a week with Joe Pasek and great guests like Mark Zwolinski and others, covering all the sports, North America, wide and all around the world, all the time.
And we're going to find out, Norm, why your name is now Norma when Mark comes on here next week or 2 weeks to preview the Stanley Cup playoffs, because you're going to read that book, and Mark's going to give you a skill testing question. If you get it right, I'll even throw in $2. If you get it wrong, you owe Mark. You have to buy everybody who's watching us. Probably we got 1,000 people watching a Norma book.
I'd be rich then. Norman, don't take that from. Have an arm wrestling contest, and then whoever wins, and when you beat Joe, That's it.
What do you mean? What do you mean when you beat Joe? All right.
My
Thanks.
money's on Norm. My
Yeah,
money's
right.
on Norm.
All
I
right.
want to see it.
Thanks for watching Maple Leafs Forever Leafs Talk, and we'll be back here soon to discuss Major League Baseball. Stay tuned, guys.